Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be solving IGCSE Biology Major in 2019, paper 22, so let's get started. Question 1 says carbon dioxide diffuses into a leaf. Which characteristic of living things requires this? Plants use carbon dioxide in photosynthesis. The formula for photosynthesis is now this right here is glucose, which is food for the plant. So the answer is C, nutrition. Question 2 says the diagram shows how Homo sapiens could have evolved from earlier ancestors. Which statement about modern people and their ancestors is correct? So when given the binomial name of an organism, the first name is always the genus in capital letters, and then the second name is species in small letters, which is always either in italics or underlined. So if we look at the names, they all have the same first names, meaning they do belong to the same species, meaning they do belong to the same genus. This eliminates options B and D. And if we look at the second name, they're all different, meaning they don't belong to the same species. So this eliminates option A, leaving us with C, which is the answer. Question 3 says heart muscles have a high rate of metabolism. Metabolism is a combination of chemical reactions. Which structures do they require to be present in high numbers? Chloroplasts don't release energy, they make food for plant cells. Mitochondria do release energy, so the answer is B. Cells don't release energy, they retain the shape of the plant cell and protect it. Vacuoles are used for storage, they don't release energy. Question 4 says which features are possessed by all plant cells? Now this is a trick question because usually you would go for option A, which says that they have both cell walls and chloroplasts, but if you think about the root hair cell, they don't have chloroplasts, which eliminates options A and C. All plant cells do have cell walls, so answer is B. Question 5 says the diagram shows a xylem vessel in a plant stem. The magnification is 400. What's the actual width of the xylem vessel along line XY? So first let's start by writing out the formula of magnification, which is magnification is equal measured length over actual length. The magnification in this case is 400, and if you measure line XY, it will give you 3.5 centimeter, which is equal to 35,000 micrometer, and I converted it to micrometer because if you look at our options, they're all in micrometer and you have to make sure that they're in the same unit. So 35,000 over A is equal to 35,000 over 400, which if you put in your calculator, it gives you 8.75. So the answer is A. As the diagram shows a test tube containing clear jelly. A drop of blue ink is injected into the middle of the jelly. The blue color of the ink spreads throughout the jelly. By which process does the blue ink spread through the jelly? It's not active transport because it's moving from an area of higher concentration where the blue ink is injected, which is the middle, to an area of lower concentration where there's no blue ink. It's not catalysis because there's no enzyme or any catalyst to speed up the chemical reaction, and it's not even a chemical reaction. It is diffusion because it's moving from an area of high concentration to low concentration. It's not osmosis because it's not the water that's moving, and there's no partially permeable membrane. Question 7 says which process describes osmosis? Now, as I said in the previous question, osmosis is the diffusion of water through a partially permeable membrane. That's the two criteria. It has to have water and it has to be through a partially permeable membrane for it to be osmosis. Which row shows the chemical elements contained in fats? Fats contain carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, so the answer is A. But let's have a quick recap. Carbohydrates are like fats. They also contain carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Proteins, on the other hand, however, they contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, sometimes phosphorus and sulfur. Question 9 says small molecules are used as the basic unit in the synthesis of large food molecules. Which statement is correct? Amino acids are the basic unit of carbohydrates. This is wrong because amino acids are the basic unit of protein.
Fatty acids are the basic unit of glycogen. This is wrong because fatty acids and glycerol make up fats, and the basic unit of glycogen is glucose. Glycerol is the basic unit of oils. This is true because oils are basically fats, so yes. Simple sugar is the basic unit of protein. This is wrong because it's the basic unit of carbohydrates, and the basic unit of protein is amino acids. Question 10 says the diagrams show a protease enzyme catalyzing the breaking of a part of a protein molecule into smaller pieces. Which diagram has 3 correct labels? This is the enzyme. Yes. This is the substrate, but that's not the product. This is the product. That's not the product, it's the substrate, so B is wrong. C is correct because all the 3 labels are correct, and D is wrong because that's not the substrate, it's the enzyme. Question number 11 says the diagram shows an experiment to investigate the balance between respiration and photosynthesis. In which tube are both photosynthesis and respiration taking place at the same time? So for this question, it's important to remember that while plants only photosynthesize when there's light available, they respire 24/7. So in both options A and B, there's a black polythene to keep the light out, so there's no photosynthesis happening. In option C, it's a plant where light is available, so it is photosynthesizing, and they're always respiring, so this is happening at the same time. In option D, it's an animal, so there's no photosynthesis happening. Question number 12 says some gardeners use Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, as a fertilizer for their plants. Epsom salts release magnesium ions into the soil. How would this benefit the plant? Magnesium ions are used to make chlorophyll in the plants, which gives the plant leaves their green color. When magnesium ions are not present or they're present in insufficient amounts, the plant will start turning yellow because there's not enough chlorophyll being made. So the benefit is that it prevents the leaves from going yellow. Question number 13 says the food label is from a packet of cereal. The label can help someone who's concerned about their diet. A person eats 45 grams of cereal. One of the food types listed in the label can help prevent constipation. Constipation is prevented by fiber. How many grams of this food type does the person eat? So an important observation is that this is for 100 grams and the person only ate 45 grams. So if 100 grams of cereal contain 2.8 grams of fiber, if a person eats 45 grams, then how many grams of fiber did they eat? If you round it, it gives you 1.3, which is A. Question number 14 says the cholera bacterium produces toxins that cause chloride ions to be secreted into the small intestine. How does this affect the water potential of blood in the intestinal capillaries and the intestinal contents? So this is the small intestine. The question said it causes chloride ions to be secreted into the small intestine. So when the ion concentration increases, the water potential decreases, and so in the capillaries there will be high water potential. So blood in the capillaries is higher or raised than lowered, so the answer is C. Question number 15 says a person eats some cheese which contain a lot of fats and protein. Which row shows the combination of substances that will digest the cheese most effectively? So we need substances that digest fat and protein. Amylase digests starch, so we don't need amylase. Option A and C are wrong. Bile and lipase both help in the digestion of fat, so we do need both of them. So option B is wrong, and we do need protease to digest the protein. The answer is D. Question number 16 says a celery stalk was placed into a beaker of blue dye. When the dye reached the leaves, the stalk was taken out and a section was cut as shown in the diagram. Which diagram shows the appearance of the cut end of the stalk? So the xylem in the stalk is going to absorb the water, which includes the blue dye. So the xylem in the vascular bundle is going to stain. Therefore, it's not A because it will stain. It is B because the xylem is present in vascular bundles around the stalk. It's not C because it won't stain from being in the water, it will stain from it being absorbed through the xylem. And it's not D because that's not the right position of the xylem, not everything is going to stain. Question number 17 says the table shows the rate of water flow through a tree over a 12-hour period. What conclusion can be drawn from the table? Option A says between 7 and 17 hours, the rate of flow continuously increases. This is wrong because between 15 and 17, it actually decreases. Option B says the greatest increase in water flow in a 2-hour period is between 11 and 13 hours. For this option, you need to find the difference between the times of the day. Between 15 to 19, it decreases, so you don't have to find that difference. But you can see that the biggest difference is 110, which is between 11 and 13, so option B is correct. Option C says water does not flow up through a tree at night. This is wrong because the rate of flow, as you can see, is never zero, even when it is at night. Option D says water flow is affected by humidity. Now, this is why I highlighted from the table, because the table never talks about humidity. It only talks about the time of the day. So while this option is true in general, it's not from the table, so it's incorrect. Question 18 says the diagram shows some potato tubers. New shoots are beginning to grow. Sucrose is being translocated from source to sink. Which statement is correct? Option A says the tuber is a sink. This is wrong because the tuber in this case is a source, since the shoots are just beginning to grow and the leaves are not above the soil yet, so they're not getting any light to photosynthesize and produce food to be the source. Option B says the soil is a sink. Now, sink and sources are terms that refer to plant parts, not any external parts, so this is wrong. Option C says the shoots are sources. They're not sources because in the question it says that they're just beginning to grow, so they need nutrients to grow, therefore they're the sink. Option D says the shoots are sinks. This is true because they need the nutrients, as I said, so they're receiving it, meaning they're the sink. Question 19 says the diagram shows cross sections through 3 types of blood vessel not drawn to the same scale. Which section is from a vein and which is from a capillary? You can tell this is a capillary because the vein and the artery always look similar when it comes to structure and shape. So these two are the arteries and capillaries, V and W. Now V is the vein because as you can see it has a large lumen and thinner walls, while the artery has thicker walls and smaller lumen, so this is the artery. The vein is W, the capillary is X, so the answer is C. So which disease is transmissible? For a disease to be transmissible, it has to be caused by a pathogen. And the only disease in this list that's caused by a pathogen is cholera, so the answer is A. It's caused by a bacteria that can be transmitted from one person to another. Question 21 says, the diagram illustrates changes in air pressure taking place inside the lungs during a complete cycle of breathing. Atmospheric pressure is 101 kilopascals, at which point on the diagram are the words beginning to be lowered. Beginning to be lowered means you are just breathing out, and when you breathe out, the air has to go from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. Now, as the question says, it's a cycle of breathing, so before you breathe out, you obviously have to breathe in, and to breathe in, it has to be from high outside to low inside your body. So if you read the y-axis here, it says pressure in the lungs. So you're not really worried about these two. You're just worried about inside. So as you can see, the pressure goes from low to high. So we need a graph, a part of the graph that goes up. So it's not B or C because in both they're going down. And if you look at this part of the diagram I drew, you can see that we end up being higher than the atmosphere. So it can't be D because D comes up to the atmospheric level, which is 101 kilopascals, but in A actually goes above. So that's why the answer is A. Question 22 says, which pathway is followed by air passing into the body?
First is your larynx, which is your voice box. I put a diagram on screen right now for you to see. But after the larynx is the trachea, you have no option. And then it's the bronchi. And then it branches into the bronchus and then the alveoli. So answer is A. Question 23 says oxygen is required for aerobic respiration. How many molecules of oxygen are required for the aerobic respiration of 3 molecules of glucose? So for this question, you need to write the formula, which is so if you look at the formula, you need 6 molecules of oxygen for 1 glucose. So if it's 3 molecules of glucose, how many oxygen do you need? So X is equal to 6 times 3 is equal to 18. So the answer is D. Question 24 says, which statement about involuntary responses is correct? Option A says they always result in the same response to the same stimulus. This is true because let's take an involuntary response triggering scenario such as touching something that's hot. Your response is always to move your hand away. So option A is correct. B says they're learned responses. This is not true because you're never really taught to move your hand away from something that's hot. It's just innate. C says they're slower than voluntary responses. This is not true, they're faster. They never use voluntary muscles. This is not true because you use the same muscle. It's just the pathway is different for voluntary and involuntary responses. Question 25 says the diagram shows the first part of a kidney tubule and its blood supply. During filtration, protein molecules do not pass through the wall of the glomerulus. Which part contains the highest concentration of protein? What happens during filtration is that the blood comes in here through at a very high pressure and about 1/5 of the fluid comes out. So whatever is left is more concentrated since a lot of fluid was already lost. And even if you didn't know this information, they gave you a hint in the question by saying that molecules don't pass out from here while the other fluids do. So whenever it comes out, it's going to be a high concentration since the fluids was lost.
Question 26 says the diagram shows a cross-section of the human eye. Which label points to the spot in the eye where vision is the sharpest? Vision is the sharpest in the fovea because it has the highest concentration of cones, so the answer is C. A is the optic nerve, D is the cornea, and B is the lens.
Question 27 says 3 plant roots have their tips removed. 2 of the shoots have a piece of agar gel placed on them as shown in the diagram. Agar gel contains auxin. The shoots are exposed to light coming from one direction. What's the appearance of the shoots after 2 days? Auxin is a hormone in plants that promotes growth. It's present in the tip, so once it's removed, there's no auxin. So this one doesn't have auxin, it's not going to grow, therefore eliminating options C and D. Here, the auxin is present on this side, so this side is going to grow, meaning the plant is going to tilt more towards the right. So the answer is A. Question 28 says the diagram shows a synapse. Heroin affects the neuron. Which label part does heroin directly affect? Heroin affects synapses in the brain in general. However, it fits into receptors that normally accept neurotransmitters called endorphins. So heroin directly affects the neurotransmitters, which is C in this answer. It affects the whole synapse, yes, but the question says directly, so the answer is C.
Question 29 says, what's an advantage of self-pollination? Evolution and genetic variation are both advantages, so them not occurring is a disadvantage. Option C is correct because isolated individuals can reproduce in self-pollination since they don't need close-by partners. It does not require gametes. This is not true.
Question number 30 says, which features allow the sperm cells to dissolve the jelly coating of the egg cell? The answer is A. Acronym develops on the head of the sperm cells and it releases enzymes that help dissolve the coat so that the nucleus of the sperm cell and the nucleus of the egg cell can fuse to form the embryo. Question 31 says the graph shows the relative concentration of hormones in the blood during days 14 to 28 of the menstrual cycle. Which letter represents the hormone progesterone in a woman who is not pregnant? For a woman who is not pregnant, the levels of progesterone after day 14 increases. So option B is wrong because it decreases. Option C and D are wrong because they both also decrease.
so the answer is A. Question 32 says, the diagram shows the chromosomes in the nucleus of a cell that divides by mitosis. Which diagram shows the chromosomes in the nucleus of one of the daughter cells produced? It's important to remember that mitosis produces genetically identical daughter cells, so the chromosomes in the nucleus have to be identical to this one. So the answer is C. Question 33 says the diploid number for mice is 40 chromosomes. How many chromosomes will be in a mouse cell formed by meiosis? For this question, it's important to remember that meiosis produces haploid cell, meaning they have half the number of a diploid cell, so 40 divided by 2 is 20. Question 34 says which statement is correct? People who are heterozygous for the sickle cell allele have resistance to malaria. This is true because having even one copy of the gene provides resistance to malaria. Sickle cell anemia is caused by a change in the amino acid sequence. This is wrong because it's a change in the DNA sequence, which then causes a change in the amino acid sequence. Sickle cell anemia is caused by both genetic and environmental factors interacting. This is wrong because it's only genetic based on the DNA sequence. The sickle cell allele is rare in human populations in areas where there is malaria. This is not true because it's not rarer. Question 35 says when antibiotics are overused they become less effective. What statement is correct? Option A says artificial selection results in resistant strains of bacteria. This is wrong because it's natural selection, because the bacteria that survive, obviously they have better genes. These ones are resistant and these are the ones that get to reproduce again. Option B says patients become resistant to the antibiotic. This is wrong. It's not the patient that become resistant, it's the bacteria. Option C says the antibiotic causes the bacteria to mutate. This is wrong. It's just that the bacteria that have genes that resist the antibiotic reproduce. Option D is obviously right. It's the last option. It says the antibiotic does not kill resistant bacteria, which is true because they're resistant to it. Question 36 says the diagram shows how sewage is treated. Why is air bubbled through the aeration tank? Air is bubbled through the aeration tank because it contains oxygen, which is needed to break down organic matter containing carbon to form carbon dioxide and water. So the answer is A. It's to encourage the microorganisms to reproduce quickly and start breaking it down. Question 37 says which trophic level has the greatest amount of energy? With each trophic level, about 90% of the energy is lost to the surroundings or used, and only about 10% is transferred to the next level. So the greatest amount of energy is always present at the lowest trophic level, so the answer is A. Question 38 says all organisms share the same genetic code. This means that the bacteria can be used too. Now the bacteria can be used for all the first three options, however, organisms sharing the same genetic code is not essential for these uses. But in DNA cloning, in which the gene of a human is inserted into the plasmid of a bacteria, it's important that they share the same genetic code, and so the answer is D. Question 39 says evidence shows that some aquatic organisms have been feminized. What's most likely the cause of this? Increased nitrates running off farmlands into the rivers. This is wrong because it causes eutrophication, not aquatic organisms getting feminized. Female hormones excreted by women taking contraceptive pills. This is correct because the hormones are then released into the ocean with the sewage and they're taken in by aquatic organisms. Infectious diseases in the fish. This is wrong because diseases can't cause feminization. Decreasing levels of oxygen in the river. This is also wrong because it doesn't cause feminization, it's only female hormones. Question 40 says, what's not a reason for using chemical fertilizers in food production? Improving growth rate. This is a reason because chemical fertilizers do improve growth rate of plants. Improving mineral content of the soil. This is true because chemical fertilizers contain nutrients that the plants need. Increasing yields. This is also true because when the plants have sufficient minerals, they do grow more and so the yield will be higher. Reducing competition with weeds. This is the answer because chemical fertilizers don't reduce the competition with weeds, it's herbicides. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, it helps me a lot.
Okay, see you in the next video.